Children, and even babies of just 6 months old, moved forcibly from their homes on the French island of Réunion, east of Madagascar in the Indian Ocean, more than 9,000 kilometres to the very centre of rural France. Today, many people not hesitating to use the word deported for what happened to the just over 2,000 children. Some were orphans, most had parents, often very poor, often illiterate, who signed release papers, not always even understanding they would never see their children again. Perhaps the most incredible thing about this story that it happened just a relatively short time ago, between 1963 and 1982. The idea to repopulate the central region of France, which was slowly being abandoned in a rural exodus. Many of the young people on their arrival in France sent to reception centres like this one in Guéret in the Krèz region. Let's see how French television presented the scheme. This from 1969.
Ces jeunes adolescents, dont l'âge s'échelonne de 12 à 21 ans, sont en général des orphelins de père et de mère. Quelques-uns seulement sont des hôtes de passage, des cas sociaux. Les jeunes hôtes de ce centre sont loin d'être des inactifs. En effet, si 23 d'entre eux fréquentent encore les bancs de l'école, une douzaine sont déjà entrés en apprentissage à Guéret et 16 autres, déjà plus avancés, sont employés et salariés dans des entreprises locales. Ceux qui travaillent à l'extérieur versent chaque mois une partie de leur salaire entre les mains du gestionnaire. Les autres assurent par roulement les divers services d'entretien de la maison.
Far, though, from this sympathetic image, for some, integration into the French countryside extremely painful. Victims of racism, some abused and exploited. Others didn't even discover their true origins for years, all deprived of their history, their identity, their culture. It wasn't until 2014 that the French state acknowledged its responsibility as lawmakers here adopted a memorial resolution. Since the symbolic vote, a commission of information and historical research created, unblocking aid to help victims in their search for their origins. So where then is the aid being used, and what has become of the children themselves? Julien Sauvaget and Clovis Casali revisit France's stolen children for France 24.
Our grandmother gathered the four of us together, and with no further explanation, she told us, "You're going to move to mainland France." That was my room. There were no bars on the window then. They were put on later. Nothing has changed, not even the gate. It was exactly the same. You'll see. Follow me. The barn was built when I lived here. The lady I stayed with had a lot of sheep. She needed the barn for all the hay to feed the sheep. I was happy here, but I was bored, so bored. I had to stay in the village until I finished school. No one ever insulted me because I have dark skin. I got on well with everyone, with all the local children, and I had an amazing primary school teacher.
Simon and his friend Jacques arrived on the same plane from the French island of Réunion in 1966.
Jacques was 14 and I was 12 when we first arrived at the centre, along with 300 children from the Réunion island. Can you imagine?
Jacques, has Simon changed since?
Not a bit. He's still the same height.
I never grew taller, did I?
For me, life was harder. I woke up every day at 5 a.m. to clean the stables. I was always with the animals, and I never got any rest. We had no holidays. I worked every day, even Sundays. Never had a weekend off. Never celebrated Christmas. It was so hard. I would see the other kids playing and having fun, and it was painful for me. I had nothing, no toys. I found that strange.
A resettlement scheme which has long been taboo in these underpopulated areas of France.
It's outrageous that they took these children out of their families to send them here, to become slave in many ways. Maybe some found themselves in kind foster families, but most ended up being used to work in farms, like slaves.
Some of them hanged themselves. Many also couldn't cope with the weather in mainland France. It's normal, they were uprooted, and it caused a lot of damage.
Ouais, c'est bien ça.
Look, uprooted like us.
Exactly. Uprooted, you could say.
Yes, it's not good for a plant to have its roots cut off.
Decades later, the scandal of the stolen children of the Reunion finally broke. In 2014, France admitted moral responsibility, bringing slight comfort to those taken 9,000 kilometers from their island to repopulate rural areas. Wounds never healed for these men and women, who formed a support group. Their meetings are a way to address the trauma through talking.
At the age of 9, Child Welfare Services took me in. In March 1964, I was deported to the Bon Pasteur Centre in Pau. I then spent most of my life in the southwest of France in Toulouse.
The word deported comes up frequently when they describe their experience. Authorities promised they would return to Reunion on school holidays, but their journeys turned into one-way tickets to mainland France.
I was born on February the 2nd, 1955, on Reunion Island in the town of Port. In December, it will be the first time I go back to my land.
After years of legal battles, the group got the French state to pay for plane tickets for them to reconnect with their roots. Jacqueline, Céline and Denise are seizing the opportunity to embark on one life-changing experience. It's not their first trip back to their native island in the heart of the Indian Ocean, but this time, the Annette sisters have come to get answers. They want to know exactly why they were forcibly dispatched from the French overseas territory. Jacqueline, who was only 6 years old when she was taken away from her mother, knows very little about the local culture.
What's a sapodilla? Sapodillas are big fruits, I think, and they're black inside. I don't really like it. It has a very particular aspect.
I don't know that fruit at all.
The sisters treasure the few memories they have of Reunion, an island that feels so different from the place where they've built their lives.
Our dad had a sugarcane field. Every day at noon, when our mother was preparing lunch, we would go to Daddy's field, and it was amazing. We were just so happy then.
Despite their efforts, they're struggling to build ties with their family here.
When we meet relatives, there's no enthusiasm. Nobody says, let's see each other again. We know them very little, apart from our older sister. On the Reunion Island, we're like tourists, not locals, so it's hard sometimes.
The sisters grew up with a sense of being different, and that hasn't faded with time. They feel like outsiders both in mainland France and in the Reunion. The one person who can bring clarity and answers to their many questions is their older sister. She never left the island. Irene saw the family torn apart after the death of their father in 1958. She was only 13 years old at the time and had to take on the role of parent.
Right after the death of our father, Mum went mad. It was a tragedy, an emotional shock. You girls went to live far away, but I stayed here to suffer. No one can ever doubt that.
There's still deep misunderstanding between Irene and her sisters. She believes she made sacrifices so they could have a better life, while they feel she's holding back secrets.
If I had to send you back to social services, I would do so again. You don't understand. You just talk and talk. And it's all in the past anyway.
The past may be in the past, but it's hard to overcome the pain from the past.
The family gathering turns into an uncomfortable moment for Irene.
And did close relatives around not offer support?
It's like I'm always repeating myself. I give you answers, but you never remember what I tell you.
Well, it's not the same questions. We just need to know the truth to move on. Well, the problem is the gap between her memories of that time and ours. But we need to know.
The few remaining family photos can't fill in all the gaps in Irene's answers. The three sisters taken away were separated early on in mainland France. They went from one foster family to another, with Jacqueline suffering psychological and physical abuse.
I feel guilty. I asked the dear Lord, what did I do? Why did you choose me to do this? They sold us dreams. Mainland France was like a dream to us. Social services told me my sisters would be better off there. France seemed like such a beautiful place from here, you know.
Yeah, they said it would be great for our education.
Yes, I believed you would become at least teachers because you were such bright pupils.
Irene never lost touch with her siblings. They would regularly write to each other. Once the three sisters became adults, they saved up enough money to make the long journey home to see their mother.
Yeah, the first time we saw Mum again, it was very distressing. We didn't even speak the same language, not a word of Creole. It was horrible not to understand our own mother.
The passing of time still hasn't healed the wounds. Their hunt for explanations continues. French authorities are now willing to help them piece together what led to their removal. At last, the sisters will get their hands on crucial files archived by the French administration. They are about to discover how the civil service assessed their situation back in the 1960s and the exact circumstances under which their mother gave them away.
It's your turn soon. It's a moment we've been waiting for. Reading this will be good for you.
Jacqueline was shocked by the information in her dossier.
Mine says, pretty girl, outgoing and smart, can migrate.
How horrible.
The three women have rarely opened up about their painful personal stories, even to their own children.
My daughter lives in Mali, and I'll phone her after this. I'll explain the situation and what I've discovered. All the things I've never discussed with her because I didn't want to bother her with all my troubles. Wow, your dossier is really thick.
Yours is the thickest.
I feel quite relieved. It's what I expected them to say about Mum. I needed details, but it's worse than I thought.
Was it emotional for you?
Yes. She was just so badly treated by them, by the government. There are lots of lies in the dossier, so many lies.
So, this is what we call the family dossier, containing all the documents about your mother. Then there's also your personal dossier, focusing on your case, with reviews, letters, birth certificate, and so on.
Though Denise is allowed to leave with the dossier, she chooses to spend an hour alone to read the files.
Here it says she would go every day to see the social services, asking for her children back.
She was sent away, treated like a dog.
They say she made a spectacle of herself.
Our mother, who fights for her children, of course she would do all she can to get them back. Some mornings I wake up, think of her, and just cry.
One question always haunted them. Who signed the paper authorizing social services to send them to mainland France? Was it their mother, their sister, or a civil servant?
I don't know if that's Mum's signature.
That's what I said. It looks too perfect. The signature is different from on her postcards. She would always write widow of, and it's not here. Look at the F. It's too perfect. That's not her writing.
The few times they saw their mother before her death, they were shocked by her dire living conditions. They know they escaped poverty by moving to mainland France, but they will never forgive the state for how it managed their case. From 1963 to 1982, more than 2,000 children like the Annette sisters left the Réunion Island. Fewer than 200 ever returned.
Julien Sauvaget and Clovis Casali revisiting France's stolen children for France 24. Well, that's all from this week's edition of Revisited. Of course, you can catch it and all the previous editions as well on our website. That's at france24.com. Thanks for watching. More news coming up very shortly.